of the Science Math Resource Center. We're in the Department of Education at MSU. And let me tell you, to all the participating teachers, you're really in for a treat today. Hopefully you were here for Jason's presentation this morning, and you'll get to hear a little bit more about the work that he's doing. And then we have 5 fabulous researchers from MSU. And let me tell you, they were picked not just because they're truly among our top researchers at the university, but also because all of them have a passion for outreach and for sharing what they do with other people. So I think you're just really gonna love hearing about what they do. And I would really encourage you to have, although this is a panel with 6 presenters, we really do want to have a dialogue with all the teachers as well. I know all of our faculty, they write grants, they're doing projects all the time, so they want to know what's happening with you as well. That's super valuable information for them. So don't be shy at any time about sharing. What equipment do you need for your classroom? What are you learning? What are your students asking questions about? What resources from the university would help you do a better job? So Melissa, I'm just going to look, do we have Eric with us yet?
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. Hello, Eric.
Hello.
Awesome. So the way we'll get started, we do have 6 panelists. I'll name them really quickly and maybe you can give a wave. Then we'll go back down the list and I will let each of our panelists take a few minutes and tell you about their research. So we have Dr. Lindsey Albertson. She's an associate professor of ecology at MSU. We have Jason Baldus. He's an ecologist with the Eastern Shoshone tribe and also an MSU alumnus and one of our keynote speakers at the conference. We have Dr. Dave Moak. He's a professor of geology and assistant director of iCAL, which is MSU's Imaging and Chemical Analysis Laboratory. We have Dr. Madison Myers. She's an assistant professor of earth sciences, and she has an awesome new project funded by the National Science Foundation. Hopefully you'll be telling us about that. We have Dr. Eric Sproles. He's an assistant professor of earth science. He's doing some awesome work funded by NASA and some other agencies. And we will have Dr. Rob Walker. I'm not sure if Rob's here with us yet, but he's a professor of chemistry and biochemistry here at MSU. He's also a lead principal investigator for the Montana Nsf Epscor Project. So again, if you joined a little bit late, although we have some awesome panelists who will share with you, they want to hear from you as well. So I think while our panelists are telling you about their research, I'd love for all the teachers in the room to use the chat to introduce yourself. I know you've done that earlier, but if you could let everybody know where you teach, what you teach, and a little bit about yourselves, I think our panelists will really appreciate hearing that. So let's get rolling. We're going to go in alphabetical order by last name. So we're going to start with Dr. Lindsey Albertson, and we'll turn it over to you to share with us what you do.
Okay, thanks, Suzi. Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsey Albertson. I'm a freshwater ecologist. I study how critters that live in rivers and lakes interact with their physical environment. And the group of critters that we study the most in my lab are invertebrates. So these are animals without a backbone. And some common ones that you all might recognize are things like mayflies or crayfish or leeches. Invertebrates in freshwater are in a biodiversity crisis. Many species are being lost or displaced due to things like water warming, damming, or the introduction of invasive species. And one of the reasons we care about losing invertebrates is that they actually can play a really important role in structuring their physical environment by acting as ecosystem engineers. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you a couple of videos of the engineers that we study. Hopefully you can see this video happening. Yes. Okay, so one of the groups that we study are net-spitting caddisflies. As larvae, these guys live under the water. I think they're pretty adorable, but what's cool about them is they spin silk webs like a spider does in the air, but they're doing this underwater. And that silk webbing can actually bind together sediment in the riverbed and can sort of control flow patterns. So we study how these critters that are sensitive to things like water temperature maybe changing their densities, how they influence physical processes related to sediment transport and hydrology. This is a little clip that's on a loop, but we do have a full video that's about 4 minutes with really awesome close-up footage of this. It's on Vimeo and it's called Caddisflies, Engineering an Ecosystem. So you can find that video if you're interested in watching the full piece. Another group that we study are crayfish. So this is a video that's sped up about 8 times. Crayfish don't actually move this quickly, but what this crayfish is doing is moving around sediment to sort of hunker down and find a little burrow where it might be safe from predators, for example. So we study how these critters actually influence what the riverbed looks like, what its topography looks like, and how much sediment will be eroded during things like floods. And then along with ecosystem engineering, we're really interested in natural history. And one of the groups of aquatic invertebrates that we study are salmon flies. If you fly fish in Montana, I know you've heard of salmon flies. They have this amazing, spectacular hatch where the larvae crawl out of the water, crawl up onto big things like trees or bushes, and the larvae will shimmy out of their exoskeleton, unfold their wings, and dry their wings out, and then they fly away as adults where they mate, and the females will lay their fertilized eggs back into the water. Salmon flies are on the decline across the West, including in Montana, and so we're interested in how physical factors may be influencing their natural history, the timing of the hatch, the size of the hatch, and things like that. So ultimately, we're interested in combining ecology with disciplines like hydrology and geomorphology and linking the critters to their physical environment. This is also sped up, I will mention too. This doesn't happen this fast, but I think it's pretty incredible. I'll stop sharing now, and that's good for me. I'll pass it on.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsey. And I'll tell everybody too, you mentioned the video that you have on Vimeo. I've seen it. It's really awesome. And we will be sure to post that on the conference webpage so everybody can find the link. Although it sounds like if we just Google, tell us again what we Google.
It's caddisflies, engineering an ecosystem on Vimeo.
Okay, awesome. And we will post a link for that as well. So thanks for that overview. Let's move along to Jason Baldus. I think I'm going to unmute you, Jason. 1 second. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Good to see you all again this afternoon. My name is Jason Baldus. I work with the National Wildlife Federation's Tribal Partnerships Program as a tribal buffalo program manager. I received my undergraduate and graduate degrees at Montana State in land resources and environmental science, and I focused my academic as well as now my professional career on tribal buffalo or bison restoration projects. Bison is a keystone species. However, we have to go to parks and refuges and private ranches to see bison. Buffalo were life's commissary for my people, the Shoshone people. We depended on this animal in a multitude of ways up until 135 years ago when they were essentially exterminated from the landscape. And so my efforts today are to really indigenize or decolonize our land use to change the imposed systems, which in Wyoming was agriculture and livestock, and instead indigenize our management to be more holistic, to manage ecological integrity, to bring this keystone species back for ecological restoration and management of our landscape, but also very, very important for cultural revitalization. Shoshone people, we refer to ourselves as the buffalo eaters, the Gwichandika. And that animal's been absent not only from the landscape, but from our diet for that extended period of time. As we begin to heal our landscape, we're also healing ourselves by reincorporating this animal into our lives, not only on the dinner plate, but culturally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. All of those components are foundational to who we are as human beings, but that relationship to buffalo has been absent. We can create many learning opportunities for not only our community members, but for our youth to understand the ecological influences, the cultural impacts, the importance of this animal in our communities again. And so the buffalo or bison effort is really to reconnect and ensure that our young people are knowledgeable in that foundation. It's also land acquisition and repatriation or rematriation through bison restoration, purchasing lands that were essentially stolen through the General Allotment Act that opened up reservations for homesteading, buying these lands back and converting them to bison habitat. These lands will eventually go back into tribal trust, which is adding lands to our reservation here. So very important implications in bison restoration from our community to the landscape, to culturally, and to how we manage our lands, tribal lands, as well as public lands. Bison restoration, that conversation is happening about how we restore this keystone species to our public lands in the West for ecological purposes. So I'm pleased to be here with you today and look forward to more of the conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. And I don't know if our panelists have had a chance to see the chat, but we're hearing from some amazing teachers from all over the place, in schools and other organizations of all topics. So be sure to take a look at that when you get a chance, and you'll get a little feel for who's in the room with us. So let's go now to Dr. David Moak. I know he was having a little computer trouble. So Dave, let us know if you're ready to share.
I think I have it. I'm going to try to share screen if
Awesome.
I can. And if I can go to presentation mode. Is that working?
Perfect. Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. And I wanted to do a brief introduction to myself. And this is a very complicated slide, but I got to go back one. I'm sorry. There we go. This is the yin and yang of my life. And I thought it would be useful to introduce kind of my nonlinear trajectory in science, because I think it's more typical than most. Let me just say in the upper right, if you can see my cursor, this is a Petoskey stone. And this is a form of hexagonalia coral that is that underlies Michigan, where I grew up. So I was that nerd pack kid that ran around the beaches filling my pockets full of stones. And I just want to emphasize how important it is to just capture the imagination of young people and give them the opportunities to study, in my case, nature, but it could be other STEM disciplines as well. I went to the University of Michigan. By way of the Michigan Field Camp, I was able to go to a field camp in the Tetons. And once I went west, I never looked back. I'm kind of a prodigal son. But then I went to University of Washington, where I studied the very ancient crust of the earth. This is over at Pine Creek Lake. If you ever want to take a beautiful hike, go about 15 miles south of Livingston and head up into the Epscor. And my research question is basically the evolution of ancient continental crust. And then this, well, I lost my cursor, but the folded rock to the right is highly deformed rocks. And these rocks flow as if they were silly putty or toothpaste. And so I study processes of the earth that occurred 20 or 30 kilometers deep in the crust. But along the way, I got a love of using analytical instruments. This happens to be an electron microprobe. And this tool opened the door for me to study all parts of the earth, including a deep sea cruise with Woods Hole to look at black smokers at the mid-Atlantic Ridge. We've looked at the hot springs of Yellowstone, and I'll say a few more words about that coming down the pike. But the interaction between minerals and microbes is a fascinating story. This little zoned thing that we see here, that's a zircon crystal. That's what I extract from rocks to try to obtain age determinations. We measure uranium-lead ratios in each of these zones to get the history of the rock. Right above that is a project that I did with John Priskew with the Dry Valley Lakes in Antarctica, looking at the microbial life forms. So I guess even though I'm a geologist by training, my interests have gone from the deep sea to actually meteorites and lunar materials from some of the oldest rocks on Earth that we've dated as far back as 3.6 billion up to active processes that occur today. And there are some unifying themes in my research that I will explain in the next slide. But I do want to say that the necessary complement to my research is my work on education. I've spent 30 years doing geoscience education, and I've been involved with numerous national reports and practices. Let me just say that my day of epiphany was when I read the AAAS Project 2061, Science for All Americans. And it just made so much sense to me to start with questions about nature, insist on the use of evidence, insist on clear communication. And so even though it's a little dated, I have to say that that was very important to me. Along the line, I've been a program officer at the National Science Foundation in the Division of Undergrad Education. I've worked on a variety of projects, including digital library resources for education, primarily in the earth sciences. Most recently, I'm very involved with ethics in the sciences. And that includes not only responsible conduct of research, but also responsible conduct of researchers, how we get along with each other and how we interact not only in the lab and in the field, but also with a larger community. So I wanted to leave you with a couple of big ideas that are really my motivators. And I think that this is important not only for scientists, but also for really our teachers and for inspiring our young future scientists. And let me just say, for me, the most important one is curiosity. Just allowing students to ask questions, what, where, why, and how, and really to inspire a sense of awe of nature. And in the background, I don't know if you can see, I'm sitting on the Beartooth Highway right now, virtually, with the Bear's Tooth in the far distance. But after over 40 years of exploring this country, I never get tired of going back and revisiting these study areas. In terms of instruction, I think everybody in this audience understands the power of inquiry and discovery. NSF's dictate for many, many years was infuse the joy of discovery. And I hope that you can impart that to your students. Observations, starting with observations in nature and then encouraging measurements and analysis of what we find in nature. And a lot of my work is done independently, but increasingly it's done collaboratively. And so how do we work in groups to achieve a common goal? And so collaborative and cooperative learning is very important. And then I also use multiple analytical instruments. So I always say the right tool for the right job. And we want to use multiple independent lines of evidence to solve our problems. Increasingly, we are teaching outside of our silos, not just geology or physics or chemistry or biology. I really encourage everybody to think about systems thinking. And the first law of ecology is articulated by Garrett Hardin. Everything is connected to everything else. And the grand challenges that face the survival of humanity on the planet really are not owned by any one discipline. And so we must use the fundamental principles from chemistry, physics, biology, and apply them to the open natural systems of the Earth system, and then try to understand how we can live responsibly and sustainably on the planet. And finally, one of my main motivators always has been service. And in part, that service to the science professions, and a large part of that has been education, really trying to recruit and make possible success for the next generation of students that have come to our classes. But we also have a sense of responsibility to society. Again, the grand challenges we're facing deal with public health and safety with respect to, in my case, geologic hazards and geologic resources, and certainly economic security. And then also, I think that we collectively have a responsibility service to the planet, and that just means good stewardship of Earth, using our knowledge of the Earth, its history and its processes to figure out how we can live sustainably. So those are some of the big ideas I wanted to share as being important motivators for me. And now let me just go to our iCAL lab, the Imaging and Chemical Analysis Lab. This is where I hang out these days. This is a regional user-oriented facility. We specialize in characterization of materials, and that includes imaging, maybe the size and shape of objects. And we use a variety of scanning electron microscopes and atomic force microscopes. We analyze for the composition of materials, and sometimes that's the bulk composition, and sometimes it's the surface, where we measure surface in a few atomic layers, 1 to 10 nanometers thick. And we also work on things like atomic structure and crystallographic orientation, which also gives us important information about the properties of materials. The iCAL lab has a very robust educational outreach program, and I encourage all of you to contact us and see if we can do something with you. Periodically, we have class lab visits. I don't know if any of you remember Taylor Hansen from Belgrade, but local earth science teacher brought his classes to our lab every year without fail, and we're very happy to do class demonstrations. If you're here for the Science Olympiad, we do demonstrations during the Olympiad. We just had a group of 4-H students come over the summer during the 4-H Congress. We can do lab demonstrations. Increasingly in the time of COVID, we've got to be a little bit better with video conferencing. We can do a live experiment on the SEM, but broadcast it to your classroom. And we also support class projects. So if you want your students to collect any manner of samples, send us samples and we'll send you images or spectra back. And so we are open for business, and I invite all of you to spend some time with us. And I'll just close with some words from Brother Walt Whitman that inspire me. I'm also a big advocate of turning STEM into STEAM. I'd love to talk to more of you about that if you would like. The earth never tires. The earth is rude, silent, incomprehensible at first. Nature is rude and incomprehensible at first. Be not discouraged, keep on. There are divine things well enveloped. I swear to you, there are divine things more beautiful than words can tell. So I hope to see you out on the trail sometime. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. We are also big advocates of STEAM instead of just STEM. So that was great to mention. And I should say to you and all the panelists, we do have space on our conference website. So if you want to put a link to iCAL or how teachers would contact you about a tour or any articles that you want to mention, we will, you can email those to me afterwards and we'll be sure to share them with all the teachers in the room. So let's go now to Dr. Madison Myers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Myers. I am starting my 4th year as an assistant professor, and I mostly study volcanoes. So I'm also a geologist, much like Dave, but most of my research has been surrounding where magma is stored in the crust. How do we figure out how long it took for it to be triggered to erupt towards the surface? What kind of modulates the style of eruption? Is it going to be like a lava flow or something explosive? And recently, largely because of the location, I've become more and more ingrained in Yellowstone research. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the projects that we have going on in Yellowstone. Okay. So one of the, we recently, as part of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, became one of the members that monitors Yellowstone. So it, of course, is a volcano. It's an extremely large volcano and very close to home, but of course doesn't erupt nearly as frequently as things like Hawaii or Alaska or the Cascades, giving us lots of opportunities to get involved with understanding what previous and historic eruptions look like. So the advantage of this, of course, has been the ability to bring students out into the field. It's a remarkable way of getting students involved with research in that there's plenty of rocks to look at. A lot of them are not really well known. And it's easy to drive 2 hours with a group of students ranging from freshmen that just started and are still trying to understand what geology is all about, to people doing their whole PhD dissertation on understanding something about Yellowstone's tempo. So Yellowstone has become this really intriguing aspect to my personal kind of research, and that we are currently updating the Geologic Map of Yellowstone. And I've posted in a resource down here that Wyoming Geologic Survey has recently published, where they actually put the entire map online to be interactive. So you can go, you could have students go and do a project associated with understanding the different rocks that make up Yellowstone. There's over 300 different types of rocks that make up Yellowstone, and it spans all the way back to about 3 billion years old to the youngest eruption, which is at 70,000 years old. So lots of interesting kind of work that can be done just looking at the geology. There's also, of course, the flip side to it, in that everyone wants to talk to you about how Yellowstone is going to erupt and kill us all. So there's actually really interesting activities that you can do called kind of like a telephone exercise, where you take a science article that may have been from legitimate science from Yellowstone and see how the news turns it into a devastating forecast. So I have done that with the school here in Bozeman as part of their science class, and talking about science communication and the importance of that. We also have done a lot of different, this photo up here is of Emma. She went to Big Sky and did different kind of activities with students that we've also done with Suzi at Family Science Night, of trying to understand how you control the explosivity of an eruption. And so a lot of the research I've focused on is associated with this funny little mock-up over here, where, you know, magma ascends towards the surface and all these bubbles come out, and how those bubbles stay stuck in the melt versus separate kind of controls what you see at the top. So this is a really engaging way to bring students in to talk about a real process that's quite important, where you can look at different materials and how bubbles get stuck in them. We're hoping to, for a science activity in a few weeks, do the exploding volcano that Mogk actually sent around this morning. And so I think that there's a lot of fun ways to engage with the community, as well as our students here, that involve a lot of the principles that Mogk talked about, which is just inquiry questions, allowing students to take a rock that we don't know very much about and making it their own. So if you want to contact me for any of these resources, please feel free to email me. We have a really great group of students that are learning from us. We actually did a volunteer program this summer where students volunteer to go into Yellowstone with us with a trained person and get a small experience in the field. So we've had about 25 students volunteer with us this summer. So it's been a pretty fun way of engaging with people. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next person.
Awesome. Thanks, Madison. I'm sure if you had $1 for every person who asked when we're going to die from the Yellowstone explosion, you maybe would be sitting on a beach somewhere drinking Mai Tais, huh?
Or like pay for one more graduate student.
Right, there you go. Okay,
I'm going to paste the interactive map in the chat, because it's pretty fun to play around with if you haven't seen it.
Awesome. And we will capture all those chat resources too. I appreciate everybody posting those there. All right, let's go now to Dr. Eric Sproles. I think we might have to unmute Eric.
There we go. Hey there, everyone. My name is Eric. I work with Madison and Dave Moak in the Department of Earth Sciences, and I use a lot of geospatial analysis, meaning the data or the information behind maps to better understand what's going on with water. And specifically, we look more at snow and ice and how that translates to what's going on downstream. And so when this is my 4th year here at MSU, and I've worked a lot in education in the past using geospatial work. And so I kind of understand you have to have, when you start to include science or math into classes, it's really important that you track on to different teachable skills that go along with it. And so so my talk is kind of based around that. And so this was kind of the teachable skill when I was in grad school. This is how we measured rivers and streams, is you literally would go out there. This is called a stadia rod, which is just kind of a big yardstick, a multi-yardstick. And you go out and you would be able to measure the stream depth or how far this river has incised or cut into the stream bank. This has changed markedly in the last 10 years. So on the left, you kind of have the more traditional techniques, and on the right, you have LiDAR or laser-based measurements. And so these laser-based measurements are really, they create these big, beautiful maps, and they're pretty amazing. And so you can work with these data. But one of the challenges with these LiDAR data is that they're really expensive and it's hard to get them. And so I'm going to show you kind of a workaround, an approach that you all maybe implement in classes and that ties into our work. And that's simply using UAVs or drones. So here we have just a very small kind of, it looks almost like a toy, but it has a pretty good little camera in it, a UAV or drone. And so I'll show you how you use this camera that's in this drone to kind of to recreate three-dimensional images and measure depth. And so basically you take this drone and you fly it around something, this feature of interest, and we'll show several different features of interest, and you collect pictures of it from multiple different aspects. So it might be just one ring, different heights. And with that, you can use simple geometry. Well, it's not simple geometry, but it's simple geometric principles to measure distance, depth. So using different, the camera angle, you can then use distance and depth to recreate a three-dimensional model. So you're kind of tying in math principles into science and measuring things. With that, you can begin to use these three-dimensional maps to create different structures. So here's a student from a 200 to 100 level class flying the same, I don't know if it's the same one, but the same model drone. And she was able to take pictures and recreate using these simple geometric processes to recreate a room that she's flying in. So she took, basically stitches together maybe 30 different pictures that she takes with this drone, has the geographic orientation, and so puts them in there, the geometry calculates. So you're kind of moving from action to math to a physical product. Now this is great, but maybe we aren't that interested in mapping rooms, but we can also use it for science, and that's where the stuff that we're doing here at MSU really ties in. So this is simply looking at a rock outcrop. So I'm not a geologist, but so I won't, and there's two geologists on here, so I won't speak too specifically, but you can really begin to map and measure these three-dimensional structures. And this also has dimensions are conserved as well in here. So you could begin to measure the height, the distance, the volume of, say, this rock over here. And I'll tell you why the volume part is important in just a second. And that's something, a local rock outcrop. This is a project that we have even bigger. So this is basically the entire upper portion of Bridger Bowl ski area. Some work that we've done for them where we can go in and use multiple drone flights, and a drone much bigger than this one. We have a lot of different ones, but a much bigger one. And we're able to create three-dimensional maps of Bridger Bowl ski area. And this is a tangible product that from an operation standpoint, they can use to begin to train new patrollers, where they can begin to map out where they're going to be setting depth charges along those lines. And so this is something that really gets students pretty fired up when you can start showing them ski routes along the way. But so how does this pertain to you all? And so not everyone's going to have these drones, and probably don't want to spend, don't have the time to spend weeks doing a map of Bridger Bowl ski area, but you can do much smaller, more tangible objects as well. Simply using a teacup, you can, the teacup's probably not going to get your students super fired up, but you can come up with things that excite them, and you can take pictures. So you don't necessarily need to have a drone. You can simply use a smartphone. Smartphone works great. The cameras in them are really well, and so the same way that the drone would fly around, you just have the camera in the middle or the object in the middle, and you just walk around. You take multiple pictures with your camera and you load them into the software, which I'll show you in just a sec. And you can begin to talk about how you integrate geometry, how you begin to use a geometry to calculate volume, and the different scientific principles that go with that. So the software, obviously there's paid for software as well, or proprietary you pay, but there's also a series of free software as well. So this is Regard 3D. It works quite well. That works on multiple systems. Again, it's freeware. And you can see you don't necessarily have to do rock outcrops or mountain ranges. You can do some pretty fun stuff. You can do a three-dimensional model of, of Kermit the Frog, which is pretty nice. On my screen share got. How do I tab over here? There we go. So here's one of a building, of a mansion. So you can begin to calculate all these, the volumetric, do 3D reconstructions using just a smartphone, which is what I've found is it really gets students fired up. They're able to recreate these things in a pretty profound way. So as I mentioned before at the beginning, we usually look at snow and snowpack. And so what we do is we have a project here in central Montana, so at the Central Agricultural Research Center, which is just about 20 miles east of, or I should say west of Lewistown. And so this is a multi-year NASA project that we have going on. And so basically what we're doing is we're collecting all the ground data to calibrate NASA's next generation sensors. And so one of the instruments that we use on this, how we tie this, this simple drone, these simple measurement techniques into this is we're able to create a really high resolution map of snow conditions. So this is a resolution. The map is every pixel represents 5 centimeters on the ground. So super high resolution. And this agricultural land. So we're also able, if you work in more in rural or areas where you're producing a lot of crops, you can talk about how crop type is, why is places where there's higher crops, does it collect more snow than less? And then from this, we're also able to create a digital elevation model or digital surface model. And this is where we can really begin to calculate volume. So I mentioned the volumetric calculations. With this, we're able to figure out how much snow is on the ground and then compare that to the NASA satellites or the NASA airborne sensors as well. And those are things that really tie in well. You can really kind of go follow the geometry all the way through to the science questions in kind of a tractable STEM way. I will peel off there. I am going to post. I will post in the chat a video that kind of explains this NASA project. I enjoy going into schools talking. If you're, obviously we also have grad students as well that can do it. And also, if you're closer to Central Montana, let me know as well, and we'd be more than happy to meet you out there at the Central Montana site too. So with that, I'll hand it over.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you. That was really cool to see those images. There were a lot that I had not seen yet. Very cool. And let's go now to Dr. Rob Walker.
Great. Thanks, Suzi. And let me try sharing. Where do we just go? Share screen and voila. And one more time. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to start by taking a page out of Dave Mogk's book. I hadn't intended to start this way, but he talked about how he, fell in love with rocks and loaded up pockets with rocks. And I mean, he was very keen and had a very clear vision of where he wanted to get to. If my vision of where I wanted to get to had panned out, I would be living inside the Beltway, probably as a lobbyist or working somewhere in government, because I went through high school and really enjoyed history. I really enjoyed government, and that was a testament to some very talented and dedicated high school teachers I had. And then I got to college, and in college, I had some lousy government and history teachers, and I had some incredibly charismatic, inspirational chemistry teachers. And that set my path. And I think I want to, again, piggyback on a theme that Dave laid out. You never know where the inspiration is going to come from. And, folks in the classroom can have impact on somebody's trajectory that will extend for a lifetime and beyond. So, to all of you who are here and committing a surprisingly smoke-free afternoon, to listen to a bunch of MSU faculty talk. Don't forget that. We very much appreciate what you do, and the impact, again, the impact can last forever. So there's that. I was in college, decided that chemistry seemed interesting, and there were some really good people doing it, and thought that there could be nothing better than teaching, and ended up, so how do I end up teaching at a college? And that required a graduate degree. And so I went to graduate school, and in graduate school, they don't give you a degree, at least a chemistry degree for teaching, but they do give it for research. And when engaging in independent research, I realized I love that too. And so in order to be able to do both of those things, seemed like I needed to try and land a university position. And one step led to another, and 25 years later, here I am. So I'm here. I'm at Montana State University. I am in the chemistry and biochemistry department, and I do. What do? I teach. I do some administrative. If there are no administrators listening, then I do administrative nonsense. If there are administrators here, then I do valuable service for the university, and I direct a research program. And that research program has high school students, it has undergraduates, it has graduate students, it often has postdocs. And what links everything that we do is what I like to say is looking at chemistry in hard to see places. And so from the outside looking in, our research program may be seen as a bit schizophrenic, projects in a number of different areas, but there is a common theme here. And I'll tell you a little bit about the projects first. Looking at chemistry in hard to see places, if you want to understand interfacial chemistry, and so what chemical structure, chemical organization, chemical reactivity happening at a buried interface between, say, water and a rock. Okay? You need to be able to use specific techniques that can discriminate a response from molecules living at the surface from everything else. And that can be a pretty heavy lift. And we have developed adapted tools that enable us to look at reactivity across solid liquid interfaces. I think when this was just starting out, Suzi mentioned the Nsf Epscor Project, and the Nsf Epscor Project is a statewide effort designed to look at water quality in Montana rivers and streams, and how that water quality is impacted by current and legacy economic activities. And so there's a project in studying the legacy effects of hard rock mining on water quality in the Upper Clark Fork in the Judith River watershed, by close to where Eric is doing his work. There is a part of this project looking at the impact of intensive dryland agriculture on nitrate levels and sulfate levels in streams. And then there's a third site in southeast Montana in the Powder River Basin looking at the impact of open air coal mining and subsequent land reclamation on both groundwater and surface water. But to understand the chemistry that's occurring at that water mineral interface, you need the right, as Dave said, you need the right tools. And so we have adapted optical methods. We use lasers to study what's at the surface, how much is there, and how does the reactivity at the surface change from what a molecule might do in bulk solution. We also study the effects of carbon particulates on lung surfactant. And so that's the second project here, organic Richmond aqueous interfaces. Related to work in the Judith River watershed, we study solute accumulation in biological membranes. And so if you're an herbicide and you're out there in the water, you have a choice of what you want to do. You can remain in the water, or if there's biological material nearby, you can partition your way into that biological membrane and find a different chemical environment, perhaps one that leaves you more stable and less susceptible to degradation, which enhances or augments your persistence in the environment. A sort of a sharp right turn from these water related projects. Another wing of our group uses optical methods to study energy chemistry. We study, how does something like natural gas get turned into electricity and products carbon dioxide, water, in high temperature devices. And so solid oxide fuel cells are a type of fuel cell. They operate at temperatures as high as 800 or 900 degrees Celsius. And that's, to calibrate you, that's the glowing orange embers, of your campfire. And this Dante-esque picture down here at the, in the middle of the bottom here, is a working solid oxide fuel cell. And we've figured out ways to drop a microscope objective into the throat of that fuel cell and study the chemistry that occurs and correlate that with performance. And so we get real-time, spatially resolved measures of how these devices take a fuel, take a renewable fuel, take natural gas, take hydrogen, you name it, and convert it into electricity and products. And furthermore, because we're measuring the electrochemistry and the material composition at the same time, we can identify the mechanisms responsible for efficient operation. And when the efficiency starts to drop, those optical signatures that we can measure, tell us this is why, this is why things are going south. This is why your device is not performing as well as it used to, and perhaps arrest that degradation and even reverse it. We develop materials to use in these devices, and so we work with engineers both here and abroad to develop new electrocatalytic materials. The bottom right-hand corner is a new project spinning up, working with the Army labs to develop new materials and study their stability using some of these fuel cell tricks for next generation solid state lithium ion batteries. And then a final project is looking at mono-propellant combustion. This is work being done for the Navy. It's really shocking to me that torpedo fuel has had the same recipe since the 1960s, and the Navy uses it to power their torpedoes, but they don't know how it burns. In other words, they don't know the mechanisms. They don't know how the ternary, or the 3-component mixture that comprises torpedo fuel, actually turns into products and propulsion and power. And so we've developed working again with some engineers, we've developed this big 600-pound stainless steel rig, and we can burn the flame that you see over here on the right is nitromethane burning in 80 atmospheres of nitrogen, and we are working our way up to actually burning torpedo fuel and trying to help the Navy understand how how torpedo fuel can be burned more efficiently. The dirty secret, and this may not be true for the folks who do a lot of field work, but the folks who are focused on lab work, faculty anyway, we are not allowed in our laboratories. We are judged by our students and those with whom we work to be more of a hindrance than a help. So we sit in our office and we process words. I have the very good fortune, though, of working with a very creative, talented team of, again, graduate students, undergraduates. Oftentimes there'll be a high school student or two during the summer. And again, I've been doing this for a while now, and they haven't fired me yet, so I'm going to keep doing it because molecules are fun, and if you can study how and why they behave the way they do, and that really is what gets you excited, then by all means you should do that. So I think I went on more than the 3 to 5 minutes, but Suzi, I will stop here.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Rob. I'm really glad you did not end up as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., because we need you and appreciate you here. And I've worked with a lot of your students. They're awesome. So that was cool that you gave a shout out to them. So thank you, everybody, for those great presentations. I know as you were speaking, we heard a lot about some of your work with teachers and with students. But I want to circle back to our panel and see if anybody, I'll just ask if you've done some projects with teachers or students in a K-12 or pre-K environment that you didn't get a chance to mention that first time around. And rather than go down the line, maybe I'll just look at our panelists. If you want to raise your hand or give me an emoji and let me know if you have anything to share, any work you've done with teachers or students. Dave.
Yeah, I would also give a shout out to the Murdoch Charitable Trust, because they have a really great program that support research experiences for teachers. It's 2 years funding. And I had a really fine teacher initially from Whitehall. She's now up in Big Fork, I think. But in any case, she spent 2 summers in the lab learning how to use all of our instruments. So look far afield, because these programs are out there, and there is funding with salary and with assistance to use the instruments, and then with funding to go to a national meeting. So the Murdoch Crust is one of these many sources.
Awesome. Thanks for mentioning that, Dave. And I know a group out of engineering just got some funding through National Science Foundation to do a research experience for teachers next year about energy, and that will be for elementary teachers. So we'll be share that info with you, with everybody too. And Lindsay, I see you have your emoji hand up.
I was also going to mention the Western Transportation Institute RET program. I don't know if their funding is continuous, but I've been participating in that for the last couple years, and it's a 6-week program. They pay the teachers to come and have this experience at MSU, and it's really fun.
Cool. Lindsay, I know you've done some workshops with teachers too. Did you want to say a word about that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. And I also wanted to mention the Masters in Science and Science Education program. I don't know if that's something a lot of these folks might know about, but if you're interested in getting a master's degree, MSU has this MSSE program that's really amazing. I teach a ecology of trout streams class. So students from all over the US, including some teachers from Montana, come here. We spend a week at Jack Creek Preserve in Big Sky, which is absolutely beautiful. And you can take your classes fully online if you want, or there are options for field classes too. So if you're interested in an advanced degree, I'm sure Suzi or Melissa might be able to share some of the information on the MSSE program. The other thing I guess I will mention is we have run some workshops with teachers thinking about invertebrates and rocks. So activities that teachers can do with their kids in the classroom, and invertebrates are nice to work with because oftentimes you don't need a permit. So you can go out and observe and not have to worry about having a permit like you might need to have to work with fish, for example. Or you can collect invertebrates and bring them back to the classroom. Just make sure you check, if you're not from Montana, which I think everybody here is, in Montana, we don't have any restrictions on collecting invertebrates. So I put a link to our website that has activities to directly link invertebrates to rocks in the chat. It's called the Rock Pack Experiment.
Cool, thank you for that. I think at this time, I'm gonna ask our audience of teachers, like I said at the beginning, I'm sure these researchers are really interested in what's happening in your world. You've heard a lot about some cool projects and some interesting ways that you can interface with researchers. Why don't we use the chat, or you can unmute and share. What have you heard so far, or what's in your mind that would be most valuable for you as a teacher? We've heard about workshops and visits and tours and resources. Why don't you use the chat and share with our team and tell us what really is most valuable to you as a teacher when you're connecting with STEM and STEAM research from the university. I'll take just a second here so we can see what people type. And actually, while we're doing that, I'll ask our panelists too, if you have specific questions for the teachers, go ahead and say those as well. If you have a specific idea in mind that you want to ask about, we can do that too. Melissa, I might help you, ask you to help me monitor here for getting any answers from teachers. What resources or connections or opportunities are most valuable to you and your students?
I don't see anything yet, but lots of excitement about the Murdoch Partners in Science program. And Katie on the line has been part of that, has been a teacher in that. Others have experienced it. And Katie says,
oh, okay. Yeah, I see this actually from Katie. Data or data collection that is accessible at a level for students so they can practice their research skills. I actually would love to roll with this one for a second because we did a survey last year of teachers and had asked a very specific question about, would you like to use authentic research data sets in your classroom? And many of the teachers said they would be interested in that, rather than pulling up data sets from a far off place or kind of manufacturing something, that it would be really cool for students to use Montana data. So why don't I ask our panelists, what data or data sets do you have that you might be able to share with students so they can do some of these exercises? And maybe I will call, let's see, I'm kind of looking at Eric in about, and you raised your hand, perfect.
I knew you were going to call on me, Susie, so I just tried to, give myself a bonus point. No, so we have a lot of data. We primarily use a lot of spatial data. So data that can be dropped into something like Google Earth. There's also a lot of other free packages as well. And so it's pretty easy for pretty low barrier to entry to get information and data set up for teachers to go in and design a curriculum or module to kind of have something that's science focused but also is place based, which is really a good way forward. And so I actually I've worked on a project before, National Science Foundation project many moons ago, that did exactly that. So I kind of know the steps to get it there, and be more than happy to work with you all to get the data set up and help you get everything into something like Google Earth to start.
Awesome.
I also think that the digital maps are also really, I know people alluded to the STEAM. I want to make sure that the A in there is not missed. Just because there's a panel of scientists on here, I think it's there's a lot of opportunity. Like, so for instance, like the map right behind me is a map of like 1842 Rome, this really high resolution. So it's pretty awesome to, you can look at these really high resolution historic maps of Rome and look where, the papal palace is as compared to the Colosseum and how that overlays with the modern city, and kind of look at the different dynamics as well. So don't forget about the A in STEAM.
Excellent. Thanks, Eric. Jason, I wonder if I might put you on the spot as well. I know you've done a lot of work with kids and teachers, and whether you had any thoughts about some of the data that you're collecting or information that you're collecting that might transfer into a classroom setting.
Yeah, I taught Intro to Environmental Science for Central Wyoming College this last semester, and in my capacity with National Wildlife Federation to grow the two buffalo programs here, the Shoshone program and the Northern Arapaho program, we had an opportunity to look at GIS and remote sensing. So I partnered with, excuse me, some researchers, excuse me, from the University of Wyoming, and they had access to a drone, and we collected some imagery for the Arapaho Buffalo program so that we could make a more calculated estimate of the fencing that would be needed to complete the enclosure so that we would be able to bring more buffalo. So I had 5 tribal students, and we flew a drone and collected the imagery, and then processed that imagery into a digital surface model. And the students learned how to really incorporate remote sensing and that into culturally relevant opportunities. So this is a program that's right here on the reservation. Our classroom is here on the reservation. There's many issues that pertain to land, water, wildlife management, fisheries. So I think that's a really important component for me, is how do we create more educational opportunities around projects that we have here at home. That was a way to do that. And I think that again, like Eric mentioned, the data collection, getting students out in the field and processing that imagery is pretty cool way to design something that can be used right here at home.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I am seeing some more action in the chat. Looks like some other teachers are interested in using that data too. And then someone had asked a question about how their students who come to MSU, and of course we want all of your students to come to MSU, how can they get involved in research? Rob, I saw that you had answered that in the chat, but would you want to say a couple words about how teachers could advise their students who are coming here to get involved?
Sure. So I think the first thing to recognize or acknowledge is that if a student is coming to MSU and is part of the Honors College has a very big push. In fact, I think they have 2 dedicated Saturdays bringing faculty in from all different disciplines to talk to first-year honors students. And so that's, the Honors College, effectively really streamlines the process. But you don't have to be in the Honors College to get involved with research. And in fact, it's the best thing to do, one of the better things to do, in the major, whatever your major happens to be, or whatever subject you happen to be most interested in, if you haven't picked a major, take a look at what the faculty in the department is doing, see if there is a research topic that resonates, and then send an email, hey, Professor Walker, hi, I'm Emily. I'm a freshman, and I really like chemistry and math. I'd like to do research. Can I come talk to you about opportunities? We all love to meet with new. I think I can speak for everyone here. We love to meet with first year or second year or third year undergraduates, who might be interested in what it is that we do. I mean, we certainly are passionate about what we do, and if we can share that, so much the better. I will say, and this is at the bottom of that message I sent back to Joel. I've had students, undergraduates, working in my lab, from their freshman year, and by the time they are graduating, they have often appeared on several papers. They have attended meetings. So national meetings of the American Chemical Society, the American Physical Society, if they stay with it, they are head and shoulders above their peers, perhaps at other institutions, because they are pushing the boundaries of what's known, and functioning like independent, critical thinking scientists at 22 years old. It's really pretty fun.
Cool. And although I'm an MSU fan, I've worked here for a very long time. I'm also a Bobcat mom. I'm the parent of a current MSU student. And I would say absolutely, it is not just propaganda that our youngest students can get involved in research and all sorts of activities. It is absolutely true. If you're interested in something and you approach somebody about working with them, it's highly likely that even the youngest students can get involved with MSU research, which is not the case at every university. So had to put in that little plug as well. I also wanted to mention there's a program here called the Hilleman Scholars. I do apologize if I miss any information, but I'll be sure to post it here. But it's a fairly new program, and it's designed to reach Montana kids who maybe don't have the highest grades in the class, but have super high potential to benefit from a college education. It was named to honor Maurice Hilleman, who was a famous virologist, or I guess he's not that famous. He should be more famous. He's probably the top virologist in all the universe, and he comes from Miles City, Montana. So check out this program called Hilleman Scholars if you have some students who might benefit from that. I know we're kind of getting close to our end here. I did want to ask a question because we have so many elementary teachers with us in the audience. I'm curious, and maybe Madison, I might put you on the spot for this question. Have you done any work with real young students, or do you have some ideas about how our elementary teachers might connect with what you're doing or with other research on campus? Hopefully, I'm not putting you on the spot too much with that one.
No, yeah, I mean, I think we've done quite a bit with young kids. I feel like actually we have to scale up at this point, but I think some of the things I've seen that have been the most exciting is, especially for people that are remote and can't physically bring someone, but I've seen a lot of success with having virtual scientists I think there's even a program called like Meet a Scientist or something, where you can like ask someone who's volunteered to do this to come into the classroom and prepare an activity. And I think that way, I even saw it in here. I think one of Connie mentioned that, like, you know, it's challenging for us to all sit up here and think of ideas for such a huge range of science, like, you know, teachers, different ages, different disciplines of like what you might need. And there's a lot of resources out there, but it's also fun to sometimes just contact a scientist within the broad area of whatever you're teaching on and see if they would be willing to come up with an activity for the level of what you're teaching. So for me, it could be just like showing videos of volcanoes and talking about like blowing bubbles into corn syrup versus water and how that might change the properties of things, or getting them to actually understand the chemical reaction that might occur. And so you can kind of upscale or downscale different activities depending, once we know enough about kind of like what level your students are at. And as Dave mentioned earlier, like inquiry-based learning, like coming up with activities that are very hands-on, but also allow you to pose a question and then test it and kind of come up with a testable hypothesis, I think works really well for, well, everyone, but easier maybe in some ways with young kids where you can kind of guide them a little bit. So anyway, those are the kind of activities we're doing. And this year we're trying to come up with more, I'm deeming my volcanology class to come up with analog models that can be used to replicate different volcanoes in the United States to then teach to students. So, you know, like I think the same thing could be done with different rocks in Montana. Like they have different kind of ways that we understand them, just like Dave was talking about like deformation in rocks. Well, those are certain type of Montana rocks that are associated with that. So anyway, I guess like broadly saying, I think there's lots of ideas, and I think a lot of us have thought about those ideas. And I think it's best just to like send feelers out to people that do research in the area of what you're teaching at and see if they'd be willing to help you or put you in contact with a graduate student that's looking for an outreach experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Madison. And I would say too, on behalf of our Science Math Resource Center, we would be happy to connect you with different people here on campus. I find people are quite generous with their time in reaching out to the K-12 community, and often the students are really interested in practicing their science communications and outreach skills too. So we are smrc@montana.edu. You could email us and ask for a recommendation and a connection. Let's see, I want to just pause real quickly here. And Melissa, I've been seeing a lot of action in the chat. Are there any questions that are coming up that we should ask our panelists here?
I don't see any questions, but definitely some other comments and ideas and things going on with teachers around the state. And Amy just shared a chat message. I would ask universities to promote to grad students in making short videos to show students information on their projects for careers in STEM.
Awesome.
That's helpful for guidance departments. I like that idea.
Yeah.
And Katie will be touching on the Skype a Scientist in her session tomorrow morning. So join that if you're interested.
Excellent. I did have a question that we had planned to talk about. Maybe this would be a good place to do a quick roll through our panelists. I'm interested, since I think all of you are working with or teaching undergraduate students, many of them fresh out of high school. I'm curious if you're seeing any skills that they're coming in with from their K-12 education that are particularly helpful in college, something that our teachers might want to know to emphasize. And maybe, Lindsey, could I start with you? Are there any skills that you're seeing in students coming into college that are particularly helpful for their college career?
I think one big one is writing. So this is, you know, a STEM group, but honestly, the limiting factor that I see is ability to communicate, and writing is the big one. A lot of students are pretty good at speaking or willing to speak in front of a group, but the writing skills, the students who have those stand out to me way above the others. So writing is a big one.
Awesome, thank you. Jason, what about you? You work with a lot of students. What are you seeing in students that is just a great STEM skill to have?
Well, I most certainly echo what Lindsay says. Writing is a key skill in being able to communicate in our science language, and to effectively do that and to get through graduate school, you have to be able to communicate well. I would also emphasize the ecological concepts. I think that ecology is about the interconnectedness, and Native people have known that for a very long time. It's a foundation of traditional ecological knowledge. And so being able to incorporate traditionally held beliefs and values and understanding and worldview is also very important, and be able to communicate that to the science community. I think ecological environmental science principles overlap very well with traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous belief systems, but how we articulate that and move across those boundaries is also very important.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. Dave.
Yeah, my mantra in the lab is I want to produce students that are critical producers and consumers of information. And so when they do an experiment, I want them to look critically at the data and to understand what variables may be impacting that data. When they look at other people's data, I want them to ask critical questions of that data. What's the source? Is there implicit bias and so on? And I think that too often in our Google age, students accept the first one or two hits that come up on a return and accept that as truth. And I would just ask that they think critically about the source and the limitations of that information.
Awesome. Definitely a good one. And if anybody has resources or have done activities for that, feel free to post those, because that's a really important skill. How about you, Madison? What do you see in the college students you work with that are valuable skills?
I think the thing that, writing for sure, as well as being able to critically think. And I think one of the things that maybe they develop as a freshman, or maybe it's something that they came to from high school with. I don't get them till sophomore year, so I don't know what happens in that freshman year. But one of the things that I feel like I spend a lot of time working on them is that there doesn't necessarily have to be only one correct answer for something, and that there are resources that they can use that are not me telling them what they need to regurgitate, that can help them explore something. So I guess like being more comfortable in that there doesn't have to be an exact answer, and that it's good to critically think through something and explain reasoning. That's something that I spend a lot of mineralogy trying to get them past, that there's just one answer.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Madison.
Also, a cool question just got popped up. So.
Oh yeah, I see that too. This is from Jennifer Statham. Thank you for the question. So for the panel, why is it important to include multiple perspectives in science instruction and multicultural, multi-intersectionality representation as well? Thanks for that question, Jennifer. And I'll just look to our panel here and see if somebody would like to answer that question. Jason.
Well, I think
Jason, go ahead.
I think
Jason
a lot of it is going to be an interdisciplinary perspective. So for example, Lindsey and I, we both work in systems that are focused on water, and but we explore things from totally different perspectives. And she looks, from the invertebrate level, and I look from the satellite level. And so we're gonna we might be looking at similar questions, but we're going to take very different avenues to get there. And because we're going to take different avenues, we might not come to the exact same conclusion. And Lindsey's probably right. I'm probably maybe partially right. But we go to, and that's so important about science, is it's not just, A plus B equals C. It is a very complicated web of ideas, science, what we don't know, like mitigating what we don't understand. And because we don't understand and we have to mitigate what we don't understand, it's super important. So Lindsey I might be addressing something and I cannot, for the life of me, cannot figure it out. And I, approach it from an aquatic ecosystems perspective. And Lindsey's like, oh, I totally get that. It's this. And so I think that multiple perspectives is super important. And so that, every nail does not look like a hammer, or the other way around. One of the two.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Let's go to Jason, and then after Jason to Dave too.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Eric. As for the multicultural, multi-intersectionality, for the science perspective that I brought to the Montana State University, it's bringing an indigenous knowledge base. It's a worldview that differs from the dominant society, and it's even individual within tribes. We share this reservation with the Northern Arapaho. These are two different cultures, two different language groups, two different customs, yet we're on the same reservation. And oftentimes Native Americans get lumped into one group, but we are all very diverse and have different beliefs and customs and histories that we bring to our through our perspectives that could change how we view how we manage something from buffalo or the water for fish. So that could be, we see that two opposing paradigms oftentimes in land use, and these two paradigms are often at odds, but finding that common ground is how we're going to move forward in ensuring that we have adequate voice in that. And so that's a bringing a unique perspective, that it's unique.
Cool. Thank you, Jason. Eric, did you have something to add?
I'd like to follow up on that. And Jason brings an amazing point and perspective. And I think this is even more important in the days where we use computer models to come up with answers. And that we'll assume that a computer model, a result from a model is correct. And it might give you an answer, but it might be not give you the right answer. It might be right for the wrong reasons. And so taking those multiple perspectives from science, from cultures, is critically important to using whatever scientific information we can understand and generate, and actually apply it into a meaningful way, in a formative way.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. And Dave, it looks like you might have a resource to share with people too.
Yeah, I just wrote one of the more important papers I think I've ever published on the intersection of geoethics and diversity. And I try to make the case that I'm sure you're all aware of the strength in diversity, but it's more than just opening the door and say, come on in, you can play with us. We can't expect people to simply adopt, let me just say, Western ways of knowing. We need to accommodate the diverse ways of knowing, because there's special knowledge from culture in place. My colleague Steve Semken has written quite a bit about this, about sense of place in the earth sciences, and how different perspectives are complementary. One is not necessarily better than the other, but they do provide different perspectives that allow us to address complex problems in ways that we could not otherwise do. So it's not simply a question of coming in and do things the way that I would do it as a old gray white Anglo scientist, but we should all learn from our communal experiences to solve these grand problems.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. And it looks like you put a link in the chat to your paper.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. How much do I love having an audience of educators and a panel of educators, because I love the interaction and the sharing of resources. It's really great. We're kind of getting down to our last 9 minutes, I guess. So I want to ask the audience if you have any questions for our panel. Maybe use the chat, just because I can't see everybody. See if we have any questions here for the panel. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I think I just, in these last few minutes, I want to circle back through each of our presenters. I'll start at the bottom of the alphabet and work our way back and just see, so that means you, Rob, is there anything that you wanted to share that you haven't, or any special ways that teachers can connect with you, or questions that you have for them?
So I was counting on 5 people going ahead of me to try to formulate an answer. In terms, I guess in terms of teachers getting in touch with me or with any of us, we're not hard to find. I mean, MSU, type in a name through you, Suzi, and your network. And so, I mean, if teachers, sometimes teachers can be their own, can be their graduating students' best advocates. And so to get the heads up from a teacher in, Big Fork or Ecological or Glasgow to say, dear Rob Walker, I've got a student who really loves chemistry. Can they get in touch with you when they get to campus? That goes a long ways, and it greases the skids, and it makes that first contact, which might be intimidating for a kid from small town Montana. It might be intimidating. They may not want to do it. But if a teacher has advocated for them, if it's has gotten out in front of that, that's great. I guess the other thing I would say is, if you don't mind delayed gratification, it's a fun job, right? You get to discover things that have never been discovered before, and if that is really what gets you going, there's no better thing to do than scientific research, and so I'm all for it.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. How about you, Eric? Is there anything you didn't get a chance to share about ways to connect with you, or any questions you have for the teachers?
So one thing I wanted to share about a skill that's very important is the mathematics skills. And so it's not necessarily what level you come in at. Obviously, the more background you have, the better, but also really understanding why math matters and apply it. So when you understand algebra, not just teaching algebra, but really understanding, why it matters and why it matters in the real world. And I kind of go back to the first calculus class I took in college, and they showed when you do an integral, well, that actually is the calculation. Like if you had a sail, that's how much wind the sail is going to catch, and going that way. And so it's not just doing calculus, but like, oh, now I kind of understand why this matters. If you ever wanted to do any, I was an engineering undergrad, so it was a little different, but really bringing it home. So it's not just A plus B equals C, really trying to connect it to the real world. And also with that, not to be scared of math, and that you might not always understand it. We always struggle with math. I mean, can be challenging, but understand that to not be afraid of it and to use it as a resource, and it's not your nemesis. In terms of connecting, reach out to us. Again, we aren't super hard to get a hold of. Sometimes we're, just if you don't hear from us after a couple of days, send another one. We do get a lot of emails, especially at the beginning of the semester. So just be persistent, and we, I know, speaking for myself, that we love going out and working with students, and I'm in Eastern and Central Montana a decent amount for work, and if we can tie something in there, that's great too.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. And I apologize. I know I was asking everybody for the skill sets, and I think I got sidetracked with the question. So thanks for mentioning the math and that detailed answer about math. That was awesome. Thank you. Madison, just want to see if there's anything you didn't get a chance to mention, or ways to connect with you, questions for the teachers.
No, yeah, I mean, I feel like please feel free to email me. I am happy to paste that in the chat if you have any interest. I think for me, I'm hoping to find ways to reach out with schools more so, but want to make sure that I'm not just bringing ideas that I think are useful, that actually serve a need. And I think that's where the fine line becomes of how to make those connections. So I think if people want to make that connection and have an idea, that would probably be the better way to start. But we also have the Science Center here in Bozeman that's trying to create really cool programs for reaching out with students, including like Girls Who Code, which is something we're trying to get involved in, believing that like coding skills, especially for women, are something that would really support more women scientists. And that's something that I think is a passion of mine. So anyway, feel free to email me with any ideas or ways that you want more involvement in your school.
Great, thanks, Madison. And that's the Montana Science Center, the museum that you were referring to. We'll be sure.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the Montana Science Center is trying to do a Girls Who Code event, but I think they had trouble getting students enrolled last year. So especially for people that are more local, but sounds like there's a Girls Who Code session tomorrow as well.
Yes, we actually have a national representative from Girls Who Code who's doing a session tomorrow, I think at lunch. So definitely check into that one.
Cool.
Dave, anything you want to share about resources or ways to connect with you?
Yeah, I put my contact information in the chat, but I wanted to reflect on the importance of community. You're not in this alone, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I've spent 25 years trying to build digital collections of resources that are evidence-based and peer-reviewed. I put the link to the CERC site, Teach the Earth. I also mentioned another one, which is the Earth Exploration Toolkit. Many people ask about using real data from the Earth. This is a great resource because it takes you through step-by-step instructions on how to find and access the data, the tools to interpret or render the data. Again, Tamara Ledley put this together, and it's an award-winning site for using real data. There are also a number of other Earth observation data sites. For example, Columbia University has interactive data loggers so that you can ask questions of the data. Is there a relationship between currents, depth, and salinity in the ocean? And students can go and ask these questions and plot the data. So I just wanted to emphasize that there are huge resources out there. There are huge programs for continuing professional development. So don't do this on your own. There's a lot of people out there to help you. And I'll just leave with one last thought, and that is getting back to inquiry and discovery. When a student asks a question, it's okay to say, I don't know, but let's find out. And I think that's probably a more important lesson is the journey, how to find out rather than an absolute answer. So that's what I have.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. And Jason, wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to share.
Sure, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to visit. My work is a lot about restoring buffalo back to tribal communities, and the education is a very big part of ensuring that our young people are grounded in buffalo, because that's going to be very important in exercising sovereignty, leading in self-determination, and holding the federal government accountable for trust responsibilities, off-reservation treaty, food sovereignty. A lot of these issues that we deal with in the science community are applicable to how our tribes will exist in the future. And so ensuring that culturally relevant research opportunities exist in the classroom for those students where it's invaluable will create future leaders that are knowledgeable about our history, knowledgeable about the traditional values and beliefs that Native people can bring to science. And I think that's happening, and it's very, very, very great to see it happening today. More students coming into the classroom and bringing their experiences, their culture, their languages with them. And that really just enriches the science that we all share together. So
cool. Thank you, Jason, and for sharing so much of your time with us this week. And Lindsey, I want to see if you had any connections or resources to share before we wrap up.
Well, the only last thing I was going to say is it's becoming really common to require your data to be uploaded to a repository when you publish. And it could be a great activity for students, probably at the higher level, maybe in high school, to have them search using something like Google Scholar or Web of Science for a local paper, and then to find a paper that has the data attached to it. I mean, oftentimes it's just a link, and then you can literally download the Excel file with the data and you could potentially recreate the figures that are in that paper.
Cool, awesome to know. Okay, well, that time flew by. I see we're just a couple minutes after 3 o'clock. Melissa has posted a link to an evaluation and reflection form. I hope you will all complete that. This is, Melissa, where they earn renewal units and help share info, feedback for us. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, and I would encourage everybody to really put your ideas in the comments. That will help us plan future sessions, discussions, professional learning, and what you need to support you through the year. And I can help with making connections too. So let's keep in touch about this. And thank you all to the amazing panelists. I have been copying all of the resources shared in the chat. So I've got a document that we can post on our conference website that will be ready to go shortly. And thank you, Suzi, for your great job facilitating and bringing together these multiple perspectives and collective knowledge. So
yeah, it's an honor to work with all
thank you,
these
everybody.
researchers. Thank you. I know it is your summertime, just like our audience. So thank you for taking time away from rest and family and everything you need to do to prep for the year and be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzi. It was fun.
All right. See ya.